In the year of 1978, 3 years after the communist takeover of Vietnam, my parents boarded fishing vessels to escape. My grandparents had realized the implications of a communist takeover. The vast majority of people not being able to have free speech rights and the ability of people to be suppressed. They were part of a movement of 2 million other political refugees who sought the means for a better future. An opportunity for a future that many of us are entitled to just being born in a country like America. My parents were crammed into a fishing boat where disease plagued them on a trip that lasted weeks. But after weeks of ocean storms and raids by pirates, on a journey that sounded to come straight out of a tale in a children's book, they reached their Gilligan's Island, an undeveloped, floating piece of land in the Indonesian Strait that lacked any infrastructure, that lacked any electricity. A place where huts had to be built, wells had to be dug, and food had to be found. It was quite simply a reversion to the hunter-gatherer times of society. But yet, fast forward to now, where my parents are now married and have built the American dream for themselves, having educational backgrounds, and being fortunate enough to live in a great suburban community like San Marino. Looking towards my family background, it didn't happen immediately in terms of the contrast of the island. Something had to happen on that island where millions passed through, waiting desperately for the opportunity to leave and be accepted by any country. Something that my parents felt forever indebted to. In a time of need and in a time of desperation, non-governmental organizations like Red Cross and many others alike provided aid workers and supplies. It showed that regardless of the systems of political, social, and economic divisions that made us all different, we were all united by our humanity. Volunteers who chose to temporarily leave their pleasant lives to a place that stripped them of any comfort. Volunteers who made the choice of working in unsanitary and oppressively hot environments to help someone they didn't even know. But yet, without the empathy and support from individuals like them, the stories of many political refugees would not have ended happy. My parents' story was no different. After a few months on the island, support from another NGO and a church group paid for the departure to America and Australia respectively, where they were able to pursue their dreams and aspirations. Now, when I was young, I always wondered why the volunteers chose to do what they did. The intuitive and seemingly obvious answer was because they cared. But answers for why people choose to help others often stop there, and I found out how misleading that was several years later when I was 13. My parents took me to what seemingly was just another family vacation in Vietnam, but instead they took us to a deserted island, a place that showed the slightest signs of previous inhabitants and dug up wells. It was then revealed that that was the same place and the same island that my parents had left over 40 years ago. My parents exposed me to a side of the world that was unknown to me previously, only seen in literature and not reality. It was initially confusing to me for why my parents would choose to return to a place that epitomized struggle and survival in their early childhood. But I realized it was for me, to remind me that the things I took for granted every day, 3 meals per day, a bed to live in, and a great community, were things that were not given or handed to them, but things they had to struggle for. The remaining part of the trip consisted with volunteering with a medical aid group, doctors, dentists, pharmacists, individuals with technical specialties, and individuals like me gathered together for the purpose of providing healthcare services to those who were less fortunate. Because I was just 13, I really did not know what to expect. But the events I saw on that trip has and will remain with me for the rest of my life. I remember the first day of the event and where hundreds of individuals came, some even walking days by foot to get there. And heck, the toothpaste line. The toothpaste line was over a mile long, as people would wait hours for something as simple as toothpaste. It was nearly incomprehensible. The stark contrast between my parents nagging me every day in America, Nathan, go brush your teeth, to seeing individuals wait so desperately for something I took for granted every single day. Now, before the trip, my parents asked my sister and I to pack some stuffed animals and to donate some stuffed animals. My sister and I had a huge collection of stuffed animals after early childhood years. I was initially reluctant to give up those stuffed animals and viewed them as a sacrifice. But on that trip, I saw kids with tattered clothes. I saw kids without proper sandals, and I saw kids without any of the means I had in America. And in their hands, I saw the very stuffed animals that I had been previously reluctant to give up. And on their faces, I saw an expression of gratitude and appreciation that I will never forget. And it made me feel guilty. It made me feel selfish for even having those thoughts in the first place. But at that moment, my guilt vanished and was replaced with this warm, wonderful feeling I had never experienced before. Now that I come to understand it, it was the gift of giving. The only guilt I had was not being able to bring more stuffed animals to give away to them. My last experience on the trip that I will remember is meeting a young boy named Tom. But the term young is actually misleading. Tom was actually the same age as me, but yet I was twice his height. And I initially thought that Tom probably had a genetic condition of some sort, or maybe Tom was plagued with some illness. But I met others like Tom, a group of 13-year-olds who were all half my height. And then I realized that they were not the different ones, but to them, I was the different one. My experience with Tom kept me awake that night. In meeting Tom, I found it absurd how something as arbitrary as the lottery of birth basically determines a large part of our lives. We don't get to choose what we are born into, and depending on what we are born into, a large part of our lives are heavily determined. Little lines drawn on a map can designate whether we suffer or not. Being born in a country like America, for the most part, means I get my civil rights protected and I get access to basic human necessities. On the other hand, being born in other regions of the earth means I don't get those guarantees. Tom may have very well been born into my background, and I may have very well been born into Tom's background. But I don't think that Tom or I did anything right or wrong to be born into what we were born into. I am privileged, and I do have a lot of opportunities. But if it wasn't for those people on the islands who had the moral compass to help those who were behind them, I wouldn't be here today. And I stand before you here today to tell you that it doesn't take a life-changing experience to recognize our humanity, to recognize that absent of the random institutions that we have created and stripped to our bare selves, we all represent the same thing. Discourse shapes reality. The things we choose to talk about, the things we choose to discuss, and the things we choose to care about shape our reality. In my world imagine, I see a world where people like Tom and I don't have barriers of privilege and socioeconomic disparity separating us. Instead, I see a world where those barriers can be broken down, where people like Tom and I can come to a mutual understanding of each other. And that's why I put it on my lifelong agenda to help others in need, others like Tom, in recognition that 40 years ago on that same island, my parents received the same treatment. And in thinking there, we are the start of that reality. As the upcoming generation, we are responsible for taking on our reality and the challenges that it brings. I am not Tom, and Tom is not me. But what unites Tom and I and every other single person in this room is our humanity. So let's act on that. Thank you.